money, your stories,
your freedom.
The Peter Schiff Show.
I am back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff at the Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com. 2 days in San Francisco. My brother Andrew and Mike Pinto did a good job filling in during my absence, which I think Mike Pinto will be doing again next week, because the majority of next week I will be out. But I am here today. We got a lot to talk about. If you want to call 8554-SCHIFF. Well, we got some economic news coming out today on producer prices. The index increased for the month by 0.7%. That's the rise in March. That's actually a little less than had been forecast, because food prices at the wholesale level apparently dropped. Well, we know that's an aberration. That's not going to continue. The core numbers are up 0.3%, which was higher than the estimates for those of you like, I guess, the Fed that pays attention to such things as the core. Also, we got a higher than expected jump in claims for weekly unemployment, 27,000 new applications for unemployment benefits, 412,000. That's the most people claiming unemployment in 2 months. So not very good news. Inflation rising as evidenced by producer prices, more people losing their jobs. So you're getting rising unemployment and rising inflation, something that the economists somehow assure us are mutually exclusive. As long as we have unemployed people, they tell us we don't have to worry about inflation. The reality is you have to worry about inflation even more when you have lots of unemployed people. Reacting to these numbers, you're getting gold's up over $10 this morning. Silver's up better than 70 cents. During my absence, I think we had a pullback in the commodity markets, gold and silver. Goldman Sachs was out making some negative calls on oil, calling for a pullback. Now, for those of you who don't know the Goldman Sachs modus operandi by now, they talk their book. So if Goldman Sachs is saying oil is going to go down, it's probably because they shorted it and they want to cover and buy it back. And so they try to use, I believe, their clout in the market to try to influence the market and then trade contrary to what they say. Whether you want to call it pump and dump or whoever, I just don't trust whatever Goldman Sachs says that something's going to go down. I think they have an ulterior motive. I think their desire is to buy whatever they're saying is going to fall. And they might have already sold some of it prior to making those comments. So I would take them with a grain of salt. I think we're going to continue to see a rising commodity market across the board because the money printing is not going to stop. Yesterday, President Obama gave his speech on his version of how to reduce or tackle the deficit problem. Now, first of all, he's not even tackling anything. According to Obama, right, the government is going to borrow, without his plan, $12 trillion in the next 10 years. And if we do what the president wants, and assuming all the economic assumptions are accurate, which of course none of them are, but assuming they are, then the deficit is only going to increase by $8 trillion over the next 10 years. So I don't think that solves the problem. I think growing the national debt by $8 trillion is an enormous problem. Is it somewhat less ominous than growing it by $12 trillion? Well, yes, but it is not a victory to say that, hey, we're only going to grow the national debt by $8 trillion over the next 10 years. But how does the president plan on cutting $4 trillion, which is $400 billion a year, from the debt? Well, he plans on doing it by raising taxes. Well, we know that's not going to work, especially since he wants to raise them on the job creators, on the so-called rich, on the people who use their income to grow the economy and provide jobs. So if you take away more of their income, well, then they will create fewer jobs. But the government is Obama is very disingenuous. He talks about spending cuts. But know what the spending cuts are? He says spending cuts through the tax code. Now, what does he mean by that? This is what Barack Obama considers a spending cut. Limiting the ability of high-income earners to deduct their home mortgage or their state taxes or their charitable contributions. In other words, tax hikes. Now, I'm all in favor of getting rid of some of these itemized deductions, but only if you lower the rates so that people don't end up paying more in taxes. you end up getting a more a code that's neutral on economic behavior, and you get a lower rate for everybody, which is positive. But Obama doesn't want to lower the rate. He actually wants to increase the rate and then take away the deductions. But to call that a spending cut when what you're doing is you're forcing individuals to fork over more of their money to the government, a spending cut is when the government spends less, not when the government taxes more. But under the new, George Orwellian doublespeak of Obama, you can turn a tax hike into a spending cut. And, of course, I think the biggest spending cut Obama has, he has $1 trillion of spending cuts. And that's because of reduced interest payments on the national debt because of all of the savings from higher taxes. So because we're going to have a lower budget deficit, our net interest expense is going to be lower, and then Obama's claiming that as some kind of cut, as if he actually made the cut. He didn't cut anything. But, of course, the assumption is wrong because interest rates are going to rise sharply over the next 10 years, even if we reduce the deficit by $4 trillion over the 10 years. And the net interest cost is going to rise sharply. It's not going to fall. So the president has got that backwards. But I want to talk a little bit about the rhetoric of this soak the rich, tax the rich, punish the rich plan that Obama has. Let me play one sound clip from his speech yesterday. This is cut number 6.
For much of the last century, our nation found a way to afford these investments and priorities with the taxes paid by its citizens. As a country that values fairness, wealthier individuals have traditionally borne a greater share of this burden than the middle class or those less fortunate. Everybody pays, but the wealthier have borne a little more. This is not because we begrudge those who've done well. We rightly celebrate their success. Instead, it's a basic reflection of our belief that those who benefited most from our way of life can afford to give back a little bit more. Moreover, this belief hasn't hindered the success of those at the top of the income scale. They continue to do better and better with each passing year.
Yeah, unfortunately, it has hindered the most the middle class that depends on the success of the rich for their jobs and for their livelihood. But let me backtrack a little bit. First of all, Obama is saying that the rich pay a little more. They don't pay a little more. They pay a lot more, at least most people. I'm not talking about the Wall Street financiers who've got special deals with the government, who get money from the Fed. But everybody else, I mean, basic entrepreneurs who have businesses, they're paying a lot more in taxes. Now, yes, they make more, but they're not paying a little bit more. They're paying a lot more. They're not only paying more in dollar terms, but they're paying a lot more in percentage terms. So let's not pretend that it's just a tiny little bit more that is being paid at the higher end. But more importantly, Obama is saying that the rich have benefited from society, that somehow they just got rich because of society, that they didn't do anything, they just got lucky. And because they got lucky, they should pay more. See, Obama has it backwards. The rich didn't benefit from society. Society benefits from the rich. See, society benefits from their hard work, from their sacrifice, from their creativity, from their ingenuity. We benefit. Everybody in America benefits, and we benefit more from the rich than we do from the middle class or the poor. So the rich are already contributing more because of their efforts. In a capitalistic society, you only get what you put in. The more you benefit society, the more society rewards you for your efforts. Anyway, I'm going to continue this line of discussion after the break. Don't go away. You're listening to Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio.
The Peter Schiff Show.
To President Obama, Secretary Geithner, Madam Pelosi, and all of the socialist econ professors across America.
We're sorry.
We're sorry.
Peter Schiff is back on the air.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff. And, I just noticed that silver prices are at a new 31-year high today. They shrugged off that correction very quickly. Gold is up, but not at a new high, so the gold to silver ratio is now at a new low. And to give you an idea of the skepticism, the wall of worry with which this bull market is climbing. Several of the key silver stocks are 10% below their highs from last week. That's how nervous the market is. Whenever the market goes down, they kill the stocks. The speculators, get out, and then silver makes a new high, and the stocks are nowhere near because of the nervousness out there. There is not much conviction in the market. You still have people who are doubting. Yet so many people call it a bubble, a bubble, a bubble. I think it's one of the furthest things from a bubble. Does that mean that the price can't fall? Of course not. The price can always fall. But my opinion is it will keep rising, despite the fact that from time to time it will fall. But there are a lot of nervous people who are looking to sell at the first sign that the market is going down. And many, many people are just purely afraid of buying. But anyway, let me go back to what I was discussing about Obama and the rich and how the rich have to give something back. My point is that they've already given. We benefit from the rich dramatically because they provide the services. They produce the goods, or at least they used to produce the goods until we drove a lot of the manufacturing out of the country. They provide the jobs. And yes, they benefit, but they don't benefit as much as society benefits from their efforts. Let's just take an example of a restaurateur. Let's say a guy has a couple of restaurants, and let's say he employs, I don't know, maybe 100 people over, let's say he has 3 restaurants. He's got some full-time, some part-time people. And let's say he's working 12-hour days, and he started off, with one restaurant, or maybe he, in order to get his first restaurant, maybe he saved a lot of money, and, his friends were going out, and he was staying home because he was saving up to buy his first restaurant or get some equipment. And anyway, so he's running this restaurant. And let's say he's making $250,000, $300,000 a year for himself. So by Obama's definition, he is rich, and therefore he should contribute more. He's benefited from the country. He's gotten lucky. He's benefited, and therefore he should pay some more. Well, who is contributing more to the country? This individual who owns and operates these restaurants, or one of the busboys that is working for minimum wage? I mean, what would happen if the restaurateur decided that he didn't want the benefits anymore, and so he just decided he was going to shut down his restaurants? What kind of impact would that have on the economy, on tax revenues? Well, first of all, let's say he stops working, so he's not paying any income taxes on his, he's not making the $250 anymore, so he's just going to relax. But what about the 100 people that he lays off? How much were they paying in taxes? And of course, not only were they going to pay less taxes, now they don't have jobs, so now they're not going to spend money at other establishments. What about the landlords? Maybe he was paying rent. Well, maybe there's no tenant now. Maybe the landlord now doesn't have a tenant. I mean, think of all the benefits that come from this entrepreneur who sacrificed and works the long hours to make a restaurant work, to make sure that it's all run properly, that all the food is there, that all the right people are there. Because a restaurant doesn't work unless it's organized, right? I mean, people just show up. Somebody has got to put it all together. The entrepreneur is like a conductor of an orchestra, right? The orchestra doesn't work. You can have all the musicians there, but unless you have a conductor, they're not going to make music. It's just going to be a bunch of noise. And so the bus boys, or the chef, or the waiter, or the girl that takes the reservations, all these people, it's not going to work without the entrepreneur organizing it and taking the risks and writing the checks. And yes, he does earn more than any of his employees, but collectively, his employees earn more than he does. And certainly, his employees pay a lot more in income taxes than he earns. And so the government benefits, society benefits. So the rich are we're benefiting from their effort. It's not the other way around. And it's not like they just have to get paid. It's the idea is that, well, they succeed because of the country that we have. The reality is they succeed despite the country. Because remember, the government is building roadblocks, barriers over which entrepreneurs need to jump. The government makes it difficult, much more difficult than it would be absent all these rules and regulations and taxes to succeed. So the fact of the matter is, most of the rich are succeeding despite the efforts of the government to prevent them from succeeding. And when they overcome all these obstacles and they make some money. Now let's say, you know what, let's take it away because they need to give back. Well, they've given back. You know, we've got Atlas Shrugged is, I think it premieres tomorrow, right? Is that April 15th? You know, it'd be nice if we could actually have the entrepreneurs go on strike to commemorate that novel or that book, but, you know, for people to appreciate. You know, we've got the rhetoric being turned up again here in Connecticut. Apparently, they're going to rewrite, you know, Malloy is going to rejigger the numbers so he can not raise taxes quite so much on the middle class, and he's going to pay for that by raising taxes more on the rich, because after all, they can afford it. So let's tax them more. And again, the problem is what they can afford. It's what would they have done with the money if the government didn't take it from them. That's another thing. And of course, you know, morally, you know, Obama's plan would put me, in a tax bracket that was in excess of 50%. So more than half of my income, of my entire income, would be taken from the government, state and federal government, in income taxes. And out of the less than 50% that I had left, I would still have to pay my property taxes and Social Security taxes and sales taxes and all sorts of other hidden taxes. What is fair about that? How is that even possibly anywhere near being fair? Anyway, let me go to the phones. First up is Paul from Orlando, Florida. Paul, welcome to the Peter Schiff Show.
Peter, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome, man. I'm really happy to be on your show. I'm a 22-year-old college student. I study political science. I have a comment and a question. The first comment is, thank you very much, sir, for what you do. You admitted the other day, I think you're not making money on this show, but trust me, dude, this show is great for anyone listening. Common sense, easy to understand.
Hey, that's
priceless.
If you're on a speakerphone, why don't you pick up the phone? We might not get the echo.
Okay, I'm sorry. Hold up. Here's my question, or it's not a question, but we all know about the nuclear disaster in Japan, and they've raised it to 7 out of 7. And when we talk about rebuilding the economy after a tsunami, they've dealt with that before, and this was one of the worst they've ever had.
Yeah, can you hold? Can you hold that thought till after the break? We're about to have a commercial, so hang on to the phone. Don't go away. We've got more of the Peter Schiff Show coming up after the break.
The Peter Schiff Show.
We now return to the Peter Schiff Show.
Call in now, 855-4-SCHIFF.
That's 855-472-4433.
Rebel Radio. The Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff, and I was talking to Paul in Orlando, Florida, about Japan. Paul, we are back. Continue with your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it to the attention that, as a political scientist, I do study economics. You've given me that knowledge. I appreciate what you've done. But when we factor in the recovery of Japan and its impact on the global economy from the damage from the tsunami, I mean, they know how to repair from that. But what we have unfolding right now, and I mean, I don't want to cause panic or over-dramatize something, but let's keep it real. We have 4 nuclear reactors that are out of control, and we have 4 spent fuel rods. 2 or 3 have been blown up in the air. And when you see these people on TV with their monitors, they're only measuring beta radiation, which has a very short half-life of like about 8 days. It's an isotope of iodine. But plutonium has half-lives of hundreds of thousands of years. And it is my opinion that the exclusion zone is going to be huge. I mean, possibly even taking out the entire northern part of Japan, possibly even maybe all of Japan, because when you consider who would want to live there with the potential long-term health consequences. This could also affect China. And we all know where the dollar's going long-term. But in my opinion, this is an X factor to accelerate the doomsday for the dollar and also a global collapse. And I can't stress it enough. the situation there, I mean, it's so terrible. It just saddens my heart for those people over there.
Yeah. Well,
but
certainly, it certainly puts pressure. It's hard for the Japanese to rebuild their own economy while propping up the American economy.
Right.
And I believe that the trade surpluses in Japan will turn into deficits as they have to import a lot more and they export less, and so they're going to need a stronger yen. There's no question about that. But deliberately weakening the yen simply compounds their problems, and it's unfortunate. A, that they have a terrible tragedy like this, and B, that the government compounds it with foolish monetary policy. But those mistakes have been made in Japan for a long time.
Right, but I mean, this is kind of my point. Like, on an economic level, like, you're not going to be able to take yen or anything else up into the northern part of Japan, because if you go up there, you're going to die. Like a radiation poisoning. I mean, it's so terrible, and we can't. There's no way to predict, but I mean, I just feel that, in my opinion, that this might be an X factor for an acceleration of the eventuality of the dollar.
Yeah, well,
in my opinion, I just wanted to, check that out. If you don't believe me, if you really look into this, and I've been studying it hard, I don't want to overestimate or overblow anything. To just keep it real, it's an absolute disaster.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for pointing that out. I'm not really sure exactly how severe. I'm not an expert on radiation or nuclear power by any means, so it's hard for me to say with any kind of degree of certainty whether the problems in Japan are being overblown or whether they're being sugar-coated. I don't know at this point. But it's interesting when you're talking about the dollar. The dollar today, the dollar index is at a new low for this particular move. The Swiss franc today is at the highest ever. It's a record high. You need $1.11 now to buy 1 Swiss franc. So it's a record low for the dollar. When I was at this the pension bridge conference in San Francisco, you really get to appreciate, because here, this is mainly institutional salesmen and people who are managing pensions, which is, other people's money. And it's very difficult. I mainly deal with people who are managing their own money. And when you're managing your own money, you're concerned about return because it's your money. When you're managing other people's money, you don't really care about the return because it's not your money. You care about doing what's right so that you keep your job and so that you don't get fired. And so you have all these pension consultants that kind of set the framework of, what is prudent for pensions to be doing. And, of course, what I think they should do is considered completely imprudent. And it's going to be very difficult for any of these pensions to ever adopt successful investment strategies. They're going to be pigeonholed into owning treasuries and U.S. stocks and dollar-denominated bonds, and it's going to be a disaster for their people. But they don't care because they're doing what they're covering their butts. I remember, too, when I first started a pension at Euro Pacific Capital, I had it when I was when it was just me, and I had a partner at the time. We had no employees. We started a pension, and we just put our money into it. And over time, we had to include some employees. We eventually had to stop it because it became uneconomical. But I remember that I was investing all of my pension in gold and silver stocks. I just figured, look, I'm just going to do capital gains in there. And all I bought, and I started it like in 98, I forget. And I put 100%. And every contribution I made, I just bought gold and silver stocks. And I stopped making contributions probably, 3 or 4 years ago. But before that, whatever I can put in, 30, 25,000, 30,000. But when I started to include my employees, I had a choice. I could have managed the whole fund for my employees and made the investment decisions for them, or I could have set up self-directed accounts. And the reason I ended up going with the self-directed accounts was because I wanted to invest all my money in gold and silver stocks, but I couldn't do that for my employees because that's not considered prudent. And even though I put the money in there, if I made a big bet on gold and silver stocks went down, I could have been sued by my own employees for not investing their money right, even though I contributed it. So what I had to do is I had to say, look, everybody's on his own, and therefore they can't sue me because each employee made their own decisions as to what they wanted to do, and then I was free to invest my money in gold and silver stocks. But if I was running the money for everybody, I wouldn't be able to do that. And so a lot of people, if you're listening, if you do have any of these retirement accounts that are administered by a third party, they're not going to get you positioned the right way because there's no reason for them to do it. They can't take the risk because if they go out on a limb and they're wrong, they get in trouble. But if they do it, if they just follow the conventional roadmap and everybody is wrong, then they don't get in trouble. And since it's not their money, there's very little incentive for them. I'll mention too, on my panel, we had a panel discussing the economic outlook, and that was really the only interesting panel. All the other speakers, it was very academic. In fact, there was a panel on commodities, and they had 3 guys talking about the case for commodities. And can you imagine a discussion of commodities by 3 people without one person mentioning the Federal Reserve, quantitative easing, the dollar, inflation, the budget deficits? In other words, none of the reasons driving the rise in commodity prices were even mentioned, as if maybe they don't even understand. They were just having an academic discussion about how to reduce the overall variance in your portfolios, and it was just all theoretical stuff. But my panel was more lively. And there were 2 bears, me and another guy, Peter, I forget his last name, Bruckenhauer. He's a good guy. See him, he pretty much agreed with me. And then there's Gary Schilling, who is also a bear, but a different kind of bear, right? He's the deflationist bear. He's got all his money in treasuries. And then there was Don Luskin, who was like the lone bull. But the problem is Don didn't really articulate the bullish case. All he did was bash the bears, particularly me, by accusing me of being a stop clock. He asked for a show of hands in the audience. How many people believe this guy? How many people own watches? At least there's more than, all he was doing was making fun of me. And I came back after his talk, and I said, look, Don, yes, I've been bearish on the U.S. economy for a long time. Maybe you haven't noticed that a lot of bad things have happened, but I've been bearish for a long time. You've been bullish for a long time. In fact, you've always been bullish. You've never been bearish. You were bullish at the peak. You were bullish in 2007, 2008 on both the economy and the market, right? So why am I a stop clock and not you? And his only answer to me was, well, you thought there was going to be a financial crisis and you lost more money. You thought there was going to be a financial crisis and you put your clients in investments that did worse than the U.S. stock market. But basically, so what's your point, Don, right? So I thought there was going to be a financial crisis and did something about it. Don didn't think there was going to be a financial crisis, so did nothing about it. Now, the U.S. stock market that Luskin was recommending people buy, that market went down a lot in 2008. So did my stuff. So in other words, I was wrong once. I knew there was a crisis, but you can argue I had the wrong plan for 2008. But Don Luskin was wrong twice. He didn't think there was a crisis, and then he lost money. But anyway, I'm going to continue discussing this after the commercial break. Don't go away. This is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com.
How did I get here?
The Peter Schiff Show. Since the Peter Schiff Show was last on the air, the national debt added another $7.89 million.
Luckily, Peter's intelligence is growing twice as fast.
That's incredible.
Welcome back to your source of sanity in an insane world. It's the Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com. Joining me after the break is going to be Solomon Khan, who is founder and president of Khan Academy. It's a not-for-profit educational organization. And so we will talk to him about what he's doing in education after the next break. Before the break, again, I was talking about the panel that I was on where Don Luskin tried to discredit my economic forecast now, because I was talking about economics, not even really investments. But my economic forecast based on the fact that the stocks that I bought went down in 2008. Now, of course, the stocks that he bought went down in 2008 as well, but somehow the fact that he got the investment landscape wrong in 2008, that doesn't discredit his bullishness, but somehow it should discredit my bearishness. But, I'm still tired of people trying to go back to 2008 as if the last several years hadn't even happened. I thought that the criticism was unfair in 2008, early 2009, in that I thought it was premature. But at least it made a lot more sense than now. You see, in 2008, you had a big rally in the dollar. You had a sell-off in commodities. So oil and metals, got clobbered. And so those stocks got clobbered. Those are the kind of stocks that I owned. And so people could argue, hey, Schiff, look, you got it wrong. And what I said is, well, it ain't over yet. You got to wait. But still, they had a point because they didn't know what was going to happen. Well, now, after several years, we know what happened. We know that I was right. The rally in the dollar was temporary. The dollar is at making new lows. Look at silver and gold. In 2008, so before the financial crisis, in mid-2008, silver was at $19 an ounce. And it went down to $9. So it fell by more than 50%. And silver stocks fell by more than 70%. 80%, I think, the silver stocks went down. Now, was I wrong to have told people to buy silver as part of their way to hedge from the financial crisis? Well, in late 2009, it certainly looked that way. If you didn't take my advice, if you bought your silver at 19 when it was down at 9, right, it looked like my advice was wrong. Well, how does it look now when silver is at 41? It doesn't look so wrong anymore. Now, was it perfect? Was my advice perfect? Of course not. Who claims perfection? If it was perfect, I would have had everybody sell at 19 and then had everybody buy back at 9. But then again, if I could do that, I'd be the richest man in the world. I wouldn't be doing a radio show. I wouldn't be running a brokerage business. I'd be on one of my many yachts in the Caribbean. So nobody claims perfection. I don't know why Don Luskin expects me to be perfect when he's far from perfect. But nobody is perfect. But it's hard. You can't argue today in 2011 that my economic forecasting was wrong because I lost money in 2008. Because I got that money back, right? The dollar is down now. Commodities are higher. Everything has reversed. So it's clear that I was correct when I said the moves in 2008 were a head fake, that the dollar's rally was temporary, that the sell-off in precious metals was temporary. But obviously back then, people didn't know that I was correct. They just assumed. I remember, that one guy that criticized my returns, had that one client that was down 60%, was saying that, well, if we have normal returns, it's going to take this guy another 10 or 15 years to break even. Well, obviously, we didn't have normal returns. It didn't take anywhere near that long because I knew that what happened in 2008 was the head fake. And I described it as the head fake. But my point is for people like Don Luskin to keep throwing up 2008 in my face as if 2009, 2010 never happened. And, of course, when Don wants to, beat me up about 2008, he also doesn't want to look at 2007 or 2006 or 2005 or 2004. Somehow, all of my entire career as an investment advisor or broker boils down to what happened to my accounts in 2008, and somehow all of my accurate economic forecasting, all my big picture forecasting can be discredited simply by saying, well, you lost money in 2008. When everybody lost money in 2008, including Don Luskin, yet somehow we should pay attention to what he has to say. I mean, I really would like to have somebody like Luskin engage me on the merits of what I'm saying. Forget about what happened in the markets. Let's talk about the underlying fundamentals confronting the United States, build a bullish case, and try to tear down my bearish case, not by attacking me, but by attacking what I'm saying in a reasonable and intelligent manner. And anyway, if he wants to do that, come on the show anytime and do it, because I don't think Luskin's a bad guy. I think he wants to be optimistic. I think he believes in the free market. He just doesn't understand how far we've strayed, and I think he wants to be optimistic on the U.S., and so I think his mind is kind of closed to what I have to say for that reason. But anyway, let me go back to the phone calls. Who do I have? Mark from Nebraska. You're on.
Hi, Peter. I had a question for you regarding buying bullion coins on credit. And around early this year, I had started doing that just because I saw the financial landscape and, concerns and fear and everything else. And I kind of want to get your opinion and, was that the right thing to do? And then what would happen, and just paying that credit off over time?
Well, who did you borrow the money from?
Just my credit cards.
So you
like a Discover card.
Yeah. So what rate of interest are you paying?
18%.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of interest to pay. That means that silver coins have to go up by 18% a year just to break even on what you're spending in debt. So I don't think credit cards are a good way to lever up an investment because the hurdle rate is so much higher. And then, of course, let's assume you have a 20% correction in the price of silver. Now, imagine how much it has to go up to get back all the interest that you're going to be paying. So I just don't think it's ever a good idea to use credit cards to buy gold and silver, other than the fact that you get mileage and you pay the whole thing off. I mean, if you can do that, I mean, it doesn't matter. But I don't think you should be financing. If somehow you can do it and get a teaser rate for 6 months and you can get like a 3 or 4 or 5%, some kind of really low rate, then I might have a different opinion. If you're able to save up the money and then pay off the balance, before the rate jumps up. But I think the best way to buy silver is when you have extra money, then use it to buy silver, because that way you're preserving your wealth. If you're just going out and borrowing money to make a bet that silver prices go up, then you're gambling. Now maybe the gamble will pay off, but it is a gamble, and so you obviously could lose if you bet wrong.
Mm-hmm. What would happen in like a hyperinflation type environment to, credit rates and everything like that?
Well, in real hyperinflation, there is no credit because nobody will loan, and so you pretty much the whole market breaks down, and to the extent that there is credit, it's not in the currency that's being hyperinflated. So to the extent that if there really is hyperinflation, if you want to borrow money, the lender is going to require you to pay it back in euros or Swiss francs or silver or gold or something. But they're not going to do it in dollars. Now, if the government has intervened and made it illegal to structure debts in other currencies or something other than the U.S. dollar, then it'll all have to be done, basically under the table, in an illegal manner. But it's it's very difficult for an economy to function when you have hyperinflation, which is one of the reasons that it's something that we should have tried to avoid at all costs.
Okay. Hey, I appreciate everything. I just recently learned about your show and everything, and it's great. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mentioned last week we really need to have a concerted effort to boost the audience of this show. I know we have another station. I forget which one it is. I'll mention it. When they're closed. I just recorded something for them. I think we have finally another affiliate's coming on board. It'll take the show live. Forget where they are, but that'll be, I think, the second one. Although we are on these two Connecticut stations where I started. But we need to get this show on, and so if the audience can make an effort to make some calls locally to some talk shows where you think there's a good format, just mentioning, hey, it'd be great to have the Peter Schiff Show on. Another way you can do it is, try to boost up my YouTube channel, my Facebook channel, to show the potential station managers that I have a big following. We've got just over 40,000 fans on my YouTube page, and I think about 43,000 on Facebook. I really would like to see if we can get that up to 50,000. If people can make a concerted effort to invite some of their friends to join and take a look at the content on both Facebook and YouTube. The more traffic we get on those sites, the more a station or program manager would find my program interesting, because they are looking for an audience because they want to sell advertising. Anyway, don't go away. We've got another hour coming up, including my guest after the break. You're listening to Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com.
Things today in Orleans. Said she hadn't heard the news, hadn't had the time to choose.
The Peter Schiff Show.
You make no friends in the pits and you take no prisoners. 1 minute you're up $500,000 in soybeans, and the next, boom, your kids don't go to college and they've repossessed your Bentley. Are you with me?
The revolution starts now.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Turn those machines back on!
You are about to enter the Peter Schiff Show.
Show me the money!
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The Peter Schiff Show is on.
Call in now. 855-4-SCHIFF.
That's 855-472-4433.
I don't know when they decided that they wanted to make a virtue out of selfishness.
Your money, your stories,
your freedom.
The Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back to the second hour of the Peter Schiff Show. Joining me now, my guest Salman Khan, who is the founder of this Khan Academy. I happen to be on the Khan Academy YouTube site now. noticing there's about just under 125,000 subscribers with almost 50 million total views. So a lot of people are taking advantage of the videos provided at the Khan Economy. Solomon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I must confess, I wasn't familiar with what you were doing prior to your becoming a guest on the show. So why don't you tell me and my audience exactly, what the motivation was behind this Khan Academy? I'm reading that it's not for profit, and so what's going on here? What are you trying to accomplish, and are you succeeding?
Sure. It started as a hobby about 5 or 6 years ago. I was working as an analyst at a hedge fund at the time, and I put these videos up really to help some cousins in New Orleans to kind of be able to tutor them remotely. And the first feedback that they gave me was that they preferred me on YouTube than in person. So I decided to keep making videos, and before I knew it, people who weren't related to me started watching the videos and sending me letters saying, hey, this really helped me pass algebra, or this really helped me pass biology or calculus or whatever. And so it was pretty exciting. I mean, the whole time I had this day job working as an analyst at a money management firm, but it was pretty neat to kind of have this hobby where at first it was kind of hundreds and then thousands of people were using it, and then you fast forward to now the videos are being used by about 2 million unique people a month. We got funding. I quit my job in 2009. I had trouble focusing on, generating alpha when I was getting all of this feedback from all these students all over the world. And so I quit my job, and then about 6-7 months later, we got funding from Google and the Gates Foundation to kind of build this into what we see as becoming a free virtual school for the world. And that means videos. It means exercises where people get feedback. There's kind of a game aspect to the exercises, and we just kind of want to keep exploring how we can deliver kind of a world-class education to anyone.
Did the money from Google, was that a grant or is that an investment where Google is looking for a return?
Well, we're not for profit, so the return has to be a kind of a feel-good return. it's a grant.
Although it's profitable, I mean, do you generate a salary for yourself at this point from?
I now do get a salary, but it's kind of capped by what's reasonable for not-for-profit.
And so where is the money coming from to pay the salaries? Is it simply from the grants, or do you have any advertisers or other sponsors that generate revenue?
So it's primarily from the grant from Google, from the Gates Foundation, and we're a team now of 6, about to be 7 people, and so that's what pays the salaries. And we also get a substantial amount from just unsolicited donations from people who say, "Wow, I learned something useful for free on the web. So here's $20."
Yeah, I'm noticing that you were recognized by Forbes in their 40 under 40 in 2010. You were tied for number 34. So did they see some kind of, was it just simply because of this, the philanthropic nature of what you were doing, or did they see some kind of commercial aspects to it? Or?
I think it's, we're kind of a strange beast in that we are not for profit. It's a philanthropic nature, but the early people who've kind of really invested in us, Google, it's actually been Bill Gates who's been very interested in what we're doing. John Doerr, who's very well known venture capitalist, and his wife they were actually some of the earliest people to really back us. So it confuses a lot of people because it looks like a hot venture-backed startup, and it has this kind of tech play, and we're growing we've grown 20-fold in the last year. So it looks like something that is a hot startup in Silicon Valley, and we're in Silicon Valley, but we are not for profit.
Because it seems to me that a commercial aspect of it, and I know there are a lot of kids that are in school that need tutoring in whatever subject it is, and their parents end up hiring somebody to come in and tutor them. But it seems to me that if probably the problems that kids have with whether it's algebra or geometry or history or mathematics, I'm sure they're pretty similar. And if you can simply have a repository of YouTube videos where parents can, instead of going out and paying for a tutor to come to the house, if they can simply log on to your academy and whatever the kid needs help in, he just watches the appropriate videos and gets the instruction that way. I mean, you could probably offer it for a fee and make the fee a lot cheaper than what it costs to hire an individual tutor.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, and I think it's not only especially for the tutoring analogy, it's not only sometimes as good as, but based on my cousin's feedback, it can be better because it's not stressful. You don't have to feel embarrassed. You don't have to do it just when the tutor's available. You can do it right when you're ready to do your problem set or whatever.
The only drawback I would think of is you can't, if you can make it interactive, because let's say, you can't ask the YouTube a question unless there's a way to have it so it's, you can anticipate some questions, and you can have little clicks where if there's a question that they have, they can click on it, and then they would bring them to like a sub video that would kind of elaborate on their question, So,
one that's kind of happening already automatically, because the videos are about 10 minutes in length, and so a lot of times people ask a question. I'm like, hey, that's a good question. Then I'll make another 10-minute video on that, to answer that question. And then we also see, someone goes on the message boards right after a video, says, hey, that was a good video, but I don't quite understand what Sal did at minute 4. And then someone else will go, hey, you should go watch this video, or they'll explain it in the message board. So we are getting some of that, and we're actually going to build more features so that a lot of those can get addressed. And you don't have to answer the question 100 times because, as you mentioned, a lot of students will probably have the same misconceptions or the same questions.
Yeah. Now, when you think about the ramifications of, expanding what you're doing, do you look at this primarily as we are something to supplement, let's say, public education or universities where students can go to get a little extra help? Or can you see an even bigger picture where this is instead of where maybe the homeschool community, or there's a way of using the internet and an online classroom setting to replace and dramatically reduce the cost of education and maybe even improve the quality? Because you can take the very best teachers and put them online where millions of people can benefit from their teaching ability, as opposed to, classroom by classroom, 20, 30 kids at a time.
Yeah, well, I guess the simple answer is yes. It's kind of both of those. I think we can, the way we view it is we can de-risk the bad instruction out there. That, there's kids stuck in classrooms. In any profession, there's some great teachers and there's some not so great teachers. And at least now the kids that are stuck in a not-so-great teacher's class have an out. They have another option. Or even if they have a great teacher, if they miss class or they were just confused, they have an out. And even for the great teachers, I think what it does is liberate them. They don't have to give a lecture anymore. They don't have to grade papers. We have this whole exercise platform. So what they do is they have every kid working at their own pace. The kids can watch lectures at home, and then when they go into the classroom, they can use that time to actually interact with the teacher and do more interesting creative projects. So it's about de-risking the low end and kind of liberating the high end.
Right.
And when I say high end, I'm talking about the good teachers.
Yeah, and when Barack Obama, when they're talking about the education problem, rather than simply trying to throw money at the situation, which obviously has not worked, because the more money we spend on education, the bigger the problem we have with education, is looking at the labor savings devices and the internet as a way to deliver a higher quality of education for less money to more people. And obviously what you're doing is showing that a lot can be learned on the internet. Anyway, we will be right back with more of this conversation on the Peter Schiff Show. This is Peter Schiff at SchiffRadio.com.
Every promise was just a runaround. I should have known it. Yeah, you're gonna let me down. And it's over now, you see. It's the last time you're gonna hurt me.
The Peter Schiff Show.
To President Obama, Secretary Geithner, Madam Pelosi, and all of the socialist econ professors across America.
We're sorry. Peter Schiff is back on the air.
And we are back. This is Peter Schiff talking with Salman Khan of Khan Academy, the YouTube channel, the Khan Academy, if you want to check it out and see some of the videos. Is everything on YouTube, or do you have another website where there's more information on the program?
At khanacademy.org is where we've kind of, it's available on YouTube, but that's where we have it's actually 2,200 videos, so you can they're all surfaced, and so people can navigate and see what they want to learn about.
Yeah, out of curiosity, do you have any videos on economics?
I have a ton of videos on economics. And you can imagine, in 2008, I was an analyst at a hedge fund, and when the financial and there was actually a couple of videos I did about the housing bubble and things, but before things really kind of hit the fan. But when things really went crazy and kind of the Fed was kind of extending its rule book, we thought the only responsible thing to do was kind of go to cash, and me and all my buddies at all the hedge funds, at least the responsible ones, were just reading the Federal Reserve Act over and over again, and so I at that time I just started. I'd watch something on the news and I'm like, that's completely wrong or that's disingenuous. So I would try to make videos on it to kind of explain what's really going on.
Any Peter Schiff videos on there, or any references to what's going on my YouTube channel or my radio show or any?
I didn't make any references. I'm a little I was just kind of in my own little island.
Well, I think it might be helpful for economics. I have a lot of books out there. There's a lot of YouTube videos on there of me explaining a lot of the problems, in advance. A lot of presentations and lectures I made that probably could be good additions to your site. If you want to look at some,
I'll definitely take a look.
Yeah, my mortgage banker's speech, or some of my my speeches at the Mises Institute. There's a lot of good discussions that for people who are interested in learning about Austrian economics. And if they want to watch on YouTube, I think that would be good. Hey, do you have any plans to offer any kind of accreditation or degree that can somebody spend time, a certain number of hours studying your videos, maybe pass some kind of test and get some kind of certificate that maybe they could say, hey, I've graduated from Khan Academy. This is what I studied. That might be something that could compete with a traditional degree or augmented degree to show that somebody has this knowledge?
Yeah, we're exploring that reality. For K through 12, actually, it's kind of already happened in high school diplomas, or even your high school transcript doesn't even matter that much anymore. It's more what how you do on your SAT or your AP test or whatever else. And so, to some degree, if you just teach really well at the K through 12 level, people do have a way to prove what they know. At the university level, what we're hoping to, a couple of government officials have come by and said, what would you do if you could help retool the workforce, or where would you allocate money if you could do whatever you wanted? I said, instead of wasting a lot of money on random programs, I would decouple the credential from the learning. That right now you have a lot of people, they have hope, they in debt, they put themselves in tens of thousands of dollars of debt to get a credential from, sometimes, not the most reputable institutions, and then they're on the other side of that saddle with the debt, and they don't end up getting a job that they expected to get. And that only happens, those institutions can charge that much money because they kind of have the oligopoly on the credential. And so
they also can charge the money because the government will guarantee the loans or now directly make the loans. So, that is the bigger problem. And of course, not only are the kids, struggling with debt, but we squandered resources on overpriced education, and we didn't use that money to grow the economy, to provide jobs for people that now have worthless degrees.
Right. And so if the government instead, and it doesn't have to be the government, it could be another party, if they gave credentials, the standard in accounting, the standard in engineering, the standard in statistics, then it completely opens up the playing field, because then Khan Academy could compete on equal terms with any of the community colleges or four-year colleges or for-profit colleges, because then people will just go, where do I get the best bang for my buck and my time in terms of learning? And once I learn something, I can go take an exam and get a credential that's universally recognized.
Yeah, and as I said, we touched on it earlier, but what's great about it is, if there are some really outstanding teachers right now that just have a gift and they're good at what they do, but unfortunately, the people that benefit are few because they have a small classroom. And you put them on this bigger stage, and far more people can benefit from their teaching ability, their teaching skills, whether they do it for free or whether they're charged. There can be a tremendous gain. And, of course, the people that benefit the most there's so many bad teachers out there, and you've got kids stuck in these classrooms, and all they've got is a bad teacher, and they have no access to a good one. But through the internet, excuse me, that can change.
Yeah, and it is changing, and the bad teacher problem is a big one, because it doesn't only hurt the student for that semester or that year. If you have a bad teacher in pre-algebra, that kind of dooms the student's life. I mean, they're going to struggle, and unless they can somehow learn it on their own, they're going to have trouble with algebra, with geometry, everything after that.
Yeah, and people forget the real goal of education is to infuse knowledge into our kids so that they understand things and they have an appreciation of the way things work, and so they build a foundation to do other things. But in the educational bureaucracy that exists in America today, those needs are like secondary. It's mainly it exists just to feed upon itself. The educational bureaucracy exists to provide employment for the bureaucrats and for the teachers. And what you can do with your academy and other people is put the kids first, and using all of the efficiencies and the economies of scale of being able to deliver a message instantaneously across the world to really get a lot of bang for your buck and bring down dramatically the cost, which is why I said that education should be less expensive. It should be cheaper to educate our kids today than it was 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago with all this technology. And the only reason it's not cheaper is because government gets in the way and runs up the cost.
I mean, I definitely agree with, especially the point about, I think it's ridiculous that, middle class, even upper middle class families, they stress about will I be able to pay for my son or daughter to go. I mean, this is like the number one concern for people, even in their, late 20s. They start to stress about it, even before they even have kids sometimes.
Yeah, my only advice to you is I think you should go more towards a for-profit route. I think that if you run it for a profit, not just to pay yourself salaries, if you can show a return, if you can get other teachers and pay, I think that if you run it as a business, that actually it can be more successful, benefit more people. I think you can reach a larger scale as a business than as a charity. That would be my 2 cents. But I think what you're doing is good either way. And I think I'm glad that you're doing it. But don't think that it somehow would diminish it. I'd like to show that, hey, we can educate people and make a profit because capitalism works. And people, and I think it might be easier to quantify it as a business with when you can keep score.
We've played with it. I think the notion earlier on, there was talk about it being a venture-funded kind of for-profit business, and our thought process, I guess my thought process at the time behind making it not-for-profit is, I just kind of played out a home run success in either reality. In the for-profit realm, maybe at IPOs, maybe I become really wealthy, but
hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Hey, if you're going to go that route, give me a call. I might want to invest. Anyway, look, thanks for being on the show. We're running out of time. Good luck with what you're doing. I think it's important, and we need more people like you. Anyway, don't go away. We have another half hour coming up on the Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio.
We now return to the Peter Schiff Show.
Call in now, 855-4-SCHIFF.
That's 855-472-4433.
Rebel Radio, the Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back, everybody. Final half hour of the Peter Schiff Show. And, my last guest, Salman Khan, about his, for-profit enterprise there. If he were to do this for a profit, it wouldn't make the effort any less noble. There is nothing wrong with doing something for a profit. And in fact, if Salman can revolutionize education, if he can bring low-cost, high-quality education to the uneducated masses and improve their lives, he deserves to get rich. And nobody will begrudge him that. Maybe President Obama, though, who will want to severely tax him for his benefiting, for his getting lucky and benefiting from society. Anyway, it just occurred to me as I was looking at silver prices up 80 cents on the day, to the new high. The best performing asset that most Americans have, and many of them probably don't even realize it, is their silverware. I remember when I got married in 2000, my wife wanted silverware. As a bachelor, I never had any real silverware, and she wanted some. We didn't, get a whole set as a wedding gift, so I went out and bought her a set of silver. We looked on the internet. We got one, kind of inexpensive. I think I paid about $4,000 for it, maybe a little more. But I remember at the time that the weight of the silver in the silverware was worth more than $2,000. I mean, so, and I forget how, it might have even been worth $3,000. I forget. So I didn't pay that much more in percentage-wise than the melt value of the silver. So what was one of the reasons I was willing to do it at the time? I thought, well, at least we're buying some silver. I mean, it's not the most efficient way to buy it, but, we do have the silverware that my wife wants, so we can use it. I mean, you can use silverware. When you just buy silver coins and put them in a vault, you don't use them for anything. If you have them on your table and you're using them to eat soup or to cut a steak, you can get some use out of your silver. Well, I'm sure now that silverware, the melt value is probably at least $20,000 on silverware that we bought for $4,000. And, as I said, I thought it would be an investment, and that's one of the reasons I did it. Of course, I got divorced, and my wife got the silverware in the divorce. So I guess from that perspective, it wasn't a great investment for me personally. But it works out for my wife, and I'm happy about that. I mean, she's got, my kid there. But I'm sure a lot of people just have no idea how much their silverware is worth. You remember that old, saying that, count the silver when, your guests leave. I mean, I wouldn't even put it out at this point because chances are your silverware, for most people, is probably the most valuable asset they have. And maybe one day people will be selling it off one utensil at a time. Would I rush to sell my silver now? No. Because, again, it's probably one of the only things that most people have that will appreciate. But I'm sure that people will be doing it spoon by fork by knife. Maybe they'll just be bartering them directly as things continue to deteriorate. Anyway, let's go back to the phones. On hold is Patrick from New York City. Patrick, you're on with Peter Schiff.
Hey, Peter, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. By the way, just as a side note, I actually have watched a bunch of the Khan Academy videos. And he's really changing the paradigm of education with these 12-minute videos. They're very effective, and I mean they're effective from. I have a master's in finance. They're effective from a grade school level all the way up to the master's level.
Yeah, look, I mean I've said many times that we're not using the internet properly, and I think the biggest impediment to using the internet is the teachers' unions and the educational establishment that would be threatened by a more efficient way to deliver education to students.
Yeah. But the reason I was calling was, I recently read an article in Rolling Stone magazine. I'm not sure if you read it, but the article described how we gave, basically through the TALF program, we gave John Mack's wife $220 million in non-recourse loans to buy distressed securities.
Yeah, I saw my brother forwarded me that article, and I read the teaser on it, but I haven't read the whole thing, so I don't know all the nuts and bolts as to how all that money ended up in her pocket. But I'm sure the criticism is well worth it in that article, even though it's obviously coming from the left. But we're giving the left a lot of ammunition to shoot us with these bailouts that are nothing. They're not capitalism. I was against all of them, but now capitalism is given a bad name. And I think I would like to see more criticism of the bailouts from right wing publications than left wing.
Right, but I mean, it basically what it did was well, first of all, she was a massage therapist basically, with no experience in buying distressed securities. But I mean, you have hundreds of hedge funds throughout the country who analyze these securities on a daily basis to find out what the value is, and they make bets, right? And those bets have risk to them. But when you get money for free, and there's non-recourse loans, you can just put the loans, whatever you buy back to the government. It takes the whole risk quotient out of the formula.
Oh yeah, when you have no risk, you'll make a massive bet. Absolutely. If I go to a roulette table and I can pick a number, and if the number hits, I win. But if it loses, I get my money back. I'm going to put everything I have on that number. I'll mortgage my house. Because why not? Why not have the biggest bet possible? Because I have no downside. Normally, what would limit my bet was my fear of loss. But take the fear away, and you're all in.
So how do I get some of that money?
Well, I guess you got to be a bigwig on Wall Street and have the right political connections. That's the problem.
Right.
Money should not be doled out. That's the communist way. That's the fascist, the socialist way, where political connections and access and gets you something. I want the free market approach. I want where it's meritocracy. Where it's not who you know but what you know. But unfortunately, in America, it's more and more who you know. and what they owe you.
If this were the 1800s, some of these guys would have been brought out and tarred and feathered.
Well, if this was the 1800s, they couldn't do it because we had a better country back then, because we had a constitution that had teeth, and we had a government that obeyed it, and a judiciary that enforced it, and a population that understood it.
So, do you have any position on QE3?
Yeah, only that it's a bad idea and that we're going to do it. You know?
We're going to do it. I mean, we're fooling ourselves right now, right? I mean, it's just like it's very hard to. It's like telling it's like your first time in rehab, a crack addict, is just quitting cold turkey.
In order for you to think that there's not going to be a QE3, you probably have to think the economy is in great shape and it won't need it. But let's assume you think that there's going to be a double dip. How can you not think there'll be QE3? Because after all, if we don't have QE3, then all the banks that we bailed out will fail again, and it'll be a bigger collapse than 2008 because it's a bigger problem now, thanks to QE2, thanks to the bailouts. So if they wouldn't let it hit the fan in 2008, what makes anybody think they'd let it hit the fan in 2011 or 2012? They're just going to go right back to the stimulus well, and they're going to say, "Oh my God, we can't let this happen." And they're going to use stimulus in the form of quantitative easing to prevent the collapse. At least try to.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, it's the equivalent of standing over a cliff, right? If you stand over a cliff and you jump right away, it's not so bad. But when you stand over a cliff and you wait there for a half an hour, the perception of the jump actually gets worse.
Well, we're assuming this is a cliff where you can survive the jump, like maybe you're diving, not like
right.
Yeah, I mean, the longer, that's the thing. The quicker you do it, it's because the anticipation is worse than the actual, the event. And
the anticipation, it messes with the fundamentals. So any of the fundamentals that were intact are getting progressively worse as time goes by.
Yes, precisely. And the fundamentals are getting a lot worse. The longer we keep rates down, the longer we keep, spiking the punch bowl, the drunker everybody gets and the more mistakes everybody makes. And the bigger the hangover when we stop doing it. Anyway, don't go away. We got another segment coming up on the Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com. Don't go away.
Someone tells me you don't mind moving closer to the sofa. I'll be better when I'm down. Stop the floor from moving and stop the wood from spinning round. My conscience says my hands are shaking. There's no way I can stop it now.
The Peter Schiff Show. Since the Peter Schiff Show was last on the air, the national debt added another $7.89 million.
Luckily, Peter's intelligence is growing twice as fast.
That's incredible.
Welcome back to your source of sanity in an insane world. It's the Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back. The final segment of the Peter Schiff Show is here. I'll try to get the remaining callers. First up is it Canal from Ontario, Canada? Hello?
Hi, Peter.
Hi, you're on.
Thank you for taking my call.
Thanks for calling. Did I pronounce your name right?
Oh, you did pretty good the first time.
Okay.
Now, I have a two-part question.
Did I lose the caller?
Inflation?
Yeah, I couldn't hear what you said. Can you start from the beginning, your question?
Sure. It's a two-part question. Nations have seen to enter into hyperinflation following an exponential curve. So is it possible that U.S. may actually have very little time left and may just be waiting for a tipping point? That's the first question. The other is that as of today, are you more bullish on gold or silver?
Well, in your first question, I've said before that I think that the fuse is very short on this bomb. I just don't know how short. And
Right.
I don't think we have a long time. I think that over the course of the next several years, this is going to blow. Now, it could happen next week. But, obviously, I think the odds are that it won't happen next week, but it could. But it's going to happen soon. So I think people have to be prepared. I think this is the time period, when they study history and they study the great economic collapse of the United States, we're living in it. I mean, it's not some future time period. a lot of people think that we have 10 or 20 years, that our children are going to be grappling with these problems. They're not. I mean, we're going to deal with them right now, one way or the other. As far as what I'm more bullish on, I've been writing. I wrote in my gold newsletter from Europac Metals that I was more bullish on silver than gold, and I have been more bullish on silver than gold for a number of years, given what the ratio was between gold and silver. Now, that ratio has been shrinking. It's now the lowest it's been in I don't know, 20, 30 years. So I think that the case for silver over gold is not as compelling as it was, but I still think silver will gain against gold. Although, at the moment, I think that gold does need to do some catching up, and I think it's going to catch up. And one of the ways it could catch up would be in a correction, where you had a drop in both the price of gold and silver, where silver would have dropped more. But it can also happen with gold rallying more, although it's probably more likely that it would happen, with both prices falling. But you never know. But I do think that right now, it's a little bit not as favorable to silver. But over the next few years, I expect the ratio to continue to shrink. So I continue to recommend that people own a combination of both gold and silver, and they in particularly
So
look
in
to buy
case of a temporary correction, what percentage drop do you think that the gold may fall?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it could fall 10%, 20%. But then again, there are a lot of people, a lot of central banks that would be jumping all over such a big decline, which is a reason to feel that it might not come, because there are so many people waiting for it, wanting to buy on that dip, that they might not get the opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, so you might, that's part of the fear of the market, that people are afraid to buy unless they get a big enough dip. And if that big enough dip comes, a lot of people just never enter the market out of fear of buying too soon. And ultimately, some of those people end up rushing in on some of the spikes, where then they're afraid they've totally missed it, and they kind of panic and rush in. That's usually when you finally do have a correction. You get a little bit of you get the they throw in, they capitulate, and so you get a pullback.
Right. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks
All right, well,
a lot.
Thanks for the call. Next up is Joe calling from Fresno, California. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Mr. Schiff. How you doing?
I am okay. How are you?
Doing very well. Just first of all, I would like to express my appreciation for the logical defense that you had for capitalism. You've been a large influence on me in the past few years. And if I may be so bold, just to kind of, you've done very good with the utilitarian view on capitalism. And I think you make reference to it in the intro video of your show, or the intro audio for your show. Another big influence has been The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand. Mm-hmm. It's like I said, if I can be so bold just to suggest to the listeners more on the moral side of the defense for capitalism. But my biggest question has been, I've been kind of talking a lot with my dad about his investment strategy, and he's slowly kind of coming over to my, more on my territory, my view on, a good investment strategy. And one of his arguments is that he's invested in a lot of American companies that are involved internationally, such as Caterpillar. I know he has a large investment with them. I just wanted to know what would be a good rebuttal for that, or if that is an actual good company to be invested in. Or
as I've said, if you're going to invest in the U.S., the multinational stocks are the best way to do it. Companies with a lot of overseas revenues, a lot of overseas assets. And so Caterpillar would fit that description. And so, yes, buying Caterpillar would be better than buying Treasuries or buying Walmart or buying Goldman Sachs. So, yeah, there are U.S. stocks that you can buy, but I think there are better ways to protect yourself. I think that your father will enjoy a better return if he gets even more exposure offshore and less risk the inshore. And again, one of the risks I think that you face at a Caterpillar is the mentality of, let's say we do have the collapse and Caterpillar has a big spike in its profits and everybody else is suffering, that we make them pay their fair share. And we have windfalls profit taxes, and the government ends up confiscating a lot of the profits that Caterpillar earns. So I think that the odds of that happening in other countries are less. So I'm just very nervous. I'm very nervous about the rhetoric, and I know that as the country's economy worsens, as the situation of the masses gets worse, this type of rhetoric can flourish more. It can find people willing to take from the rich, because after all, they're responsible for our problems. That the reason that the income of the poor is stagnating is because the rich have too much, and the only way to make the poor richer is to make the rich poorer. And of course, that's wrong. When you make the rich poorer, you make the poor that even poorer. I mean, yes, temporarily they benefit because they take their money and they blow it on some consumer good that they might otherwise not have had, but then the money is gone, and then what do you do? I'm just very worried. So talk to him, have him talk to one of my brokers about the benefits that we can bring. Because after all, I mean, I'm not sure your father's age, but a lot of this money might end up being your money. So you have a big vested interest in how it's invested. And of course, if your father goes broke, it's going to be up to you to support him. So you want to make sure that he has the best portfolio possible. All right. Anyway, I'm told the next caller is my brother. Andy, are you on the line?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, well, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just called in because I read that article, the Matt Taibbi article, and and we'd love to get him on the show to talk about it, of course. But this is, Matt Taibbi is a really good writer. I mean, he's a left-wing guy, but he's a great writer just in terms of his prose, and I have to admire that. And the story that he's got his teeth into is a really great one. Of course, he wants to use it to discredit everything that Wall Street stands for. But I mean, it is pretty, freaking bad if you can use that on radio. And essentially, what it's all about is like, during the height of the 2009, when basically the Fed is handing out money to everybody, all it took was a couple of conversations over a coffee table on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And this John Mack, who's the CEO of Morgan Stanley, his wife, who never had a financial job in her life, and another wife of a big CEO, I forget who, they all of a sudden they invest $15 million to get a $220 million loan from the Fed in order to buy some tranche of securitized assets that one of their friends owned in another bank. It was a different tranche of securitized assets of loans. And basically, in the program, it's guaranteed that they would keep 90% of the profits and have none of the losses.
Yeah,
so it
seems to me that they did it under their wives' names. It was really their money, and they were doing it, but they didn't want people to know they were getting it. So they
what do their wives know about? Their wives said, "Oh, John, how about this great tranche of securitized mortgage loans that your friend over there owns at Morgan Stanley?"
I heard about it at the beauty salon when I was getting my Botox done. Obviously, this whole thing was designed to disguise who was really getting the money. So, this seems like a fraudulent transaction, and they're taking advantage of what the government was doing, and the whole thing stinks.
Well, I don't know if there's fraud, but I mean, it was clearly a very simple way to give really wealthy people a lot of money to make a risk-free investment.
Yeah, well, that's what it was all about. Yeah.
That's what it's there, and it's a fascinating article. Of course, they use it to say the whole this whole.
They discredit everybody. They discredit the legitimate entrepreneurs because of this socialism, corporatism, fascism, whatever we got going on between Wall Street and Washington. But anyway, hey, great show's coming to an end. I'll be back again tomorrow for another full episode of the Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio.